Today is October 21st, 1974, and I'm interviewing Rabbi Dembowitz in Havertown, Pennsylvania. I'd like to begin the interview by asking, first of all, when did you first enter the chaplaincy, and or when did you first go to Europe?
Dates I don't recall. I'll have to get you the dates. If the dates are important
Well,
to you, the dates I'll have to get you. I don't recall. I think I went into the chaplaincy in '43, in or June of '43, and that I went overseas. I left for overseas, I think, on D-Day.
Okay, fine.
And that's when I. Yeah.
What were the when did you first encounter Jews?
Well, my first assignment overseas was in Rouen, France, and there I came in contact with the Jews who remained in Rouen or came back to Rouen after the American Army came into France. And I had, when I came to the General Hospital to which I was assigned, it was 179th General Hospital. Of course, the chaplain's responsibilities in the Army overseas, as I presume you know by now, was that they, in most instances, given a base of operation from which they fanned out and served a larger area. My area in France at that time was pretty much from everything outside of the perimeter of Paris, with Rouen as the center, going to Le Havre, and there at that time there was a great deal of activity with regard to what we call the cigarette camps.
Could you be specific?
Army installations that were named after the cigarettes, that were called cigarette camps, which were actually ports of or army bases where the personnel, army personnel, were being processed on their way back to the States after having served in their tour of duty, whether it was any place in the European theater. And but in Rouen itself, there had been a synagogue. There was a flourishing Jewish community before the war, and when I arrived there, I began to meet one or two Jews, and ultimately reorganized the Jewish community and reestablished it and had services for them and things of that nature. One of the things that might be interesting to you from the point of view of your work was that in Rouen there was one fellow who came to see me who had remained in Rouen during the entire occupation, the Nazi occupation. He was married, and he presented himself to the authorities as being a Christian, and a boy, his son, was born to him, and he was very anxious to have a Brit Milah. And so we arranged for an anesthetist from the hospital and a surgeon and a pediatrician to go to this fellow's apartment, and there we took this 5-year-old lad on the dining room table, and we had a Brit Milah. And that was my first contact with Jews. While I was there, I managed to get from them, or from people who were around there, the lists of the Jews from Rouen and that general area who had been taken by the Nazis and sent to different concentration camps and so on.
And aside from this contact with the Jews, did you meet any other groups of Jews at that point? Did they all come together at this new synagogue, or at the synagogue at this point? How did it evolve?
What, well, it evolved by somebody saying to me when I got to the hospital, and naturally there were other Jewish personnel there, chaplain, you ought to meet so-and-so who was a Jew from the community. And when I met one family, I then met the rest of the families. And in that way we got together, and I learned what their experiences had been during the war. And I suggested to them the possibility of their coming together for a service, not on the military's point of view, but from the point of view of the Jewish community. And so we got together for services, and I recall conducting a service the way we do in the United States, or conservative service, where there was Hebrew and French, and I even went so far as to preach to them in French, which made a tremendous impression upon them. Not so much my preaching in French as their reading prayers in French, which was a great assistance to them. And then there were certain needs that they had, financial needs, which we tried to help them with.
Now, how did you, as a chaplain, as a Jewish chaplain, help them?
As a Jewish...
In other words, what did you do in order to provide those needs?
Well, if they needed certain things, which were perhaps scarce to be gotten by the at the time in Rouen, either I would ask some of the Jewish army personnel who had entree to some of these things to see if they can help me get it, or else I would perhaps turn this off for a minute. I would try to contact those army personnel who knew the town better than I did, and knew their way around perhaps better, to find out those resources that were available in order to be able to be of assistance to them and to give them whatever they need and to send them whatever they need. For instance, some army surplus clothes, which supposedly was expendable, might have gone to clothing the caring for the children and the people who didn't have clothes for the winter time. And then whenever there was a service of army personnel, we would always make an appeal for funds or appeal for things. And the GIs would always come forth with various and sundry things that they had, either cigarettes, cans of food, shaving cream, those things which at that time were very difficult to come by and which were very important, things that they would purchase in the PX which they didn't need. But in order to give it to the people in the local communities, either for their own use or that they might use for, may I say, barter, quote unquote. Right. So that this was, in one instance I recall there was need for some very serious medication, which was extremely hard to come by, which was help in saving a person's life. And that kind of medication came from the hospital situation.
Now, let's be a little more specific, if we can, in that you say that you had spoken to the Army and requested certain things from them.
Not the Army.
Not the Army.
Not the Army officially. All these things were done unofficially.
Right.
Done, when I say the Army, I meant Army personnel, right. In other words, Jewish personnel or even non-Jewish personnel, with whom I became befriended. And the fellow was in a certain position. I would say to him, you have access to X, Y, or Z. How about I need this for a family here, or I need this for a family there.
I see. So
but it was not a, there was no official request.
I see.
There was a general understanding as far as I was concerned through my tour of duty, and I think it was true with all chaplains, that the last resort was an official request. Everything was done unofficially, and even when you did it officially, as certain cases that came up in Germany later on, in Esslingen, for instance, where I had found I was led to a common grave of some 39 Jews who had been buried there, and we disinterred the bodies, and we we brought them to Jewish burial. And I needed some trucks to transport the coffins from the site to the Jewish cemetery in Esslingen. though I asked the colonel in charge of the motor pool for the trucks, it was by word of mouth rather than an official request going through channels.
Uh-huh. Did you find that non-Jewish Army personnel cooperated as well?
Very much so. Mm-hmm. Very much so. There was no distinction between it. In fact, as I reflect now, some of the great assistance that I got came from non-Jewish personnel, mm-hmm. as well as Jewish personnel.
Now, the Jews that you met in France were in need of minor.
They were in need. They were in need at that time of a sense of belonging, mm-hmm. The need of reconstructing their Jewish life, and a need of some kind of material assistance at a given moment, usually of things that were unobtainable, not in terms of needing money, so to speak, but what they needed was sometimes the things which they couldn't get and which were a tremendous necessity. At that time, sulfur was the thing. Mm-hmm. Now, if somebody was very ill and needed sulfur pills or that kind of medication, this was the kind of thing. Or warm clothing, which was not available at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you help in any way to get this community back together again? I know in the spiritual sense you conducted services, and that was a very important function.
Well, all I can tell you is that on a trip to Europe in '58, I revisited Rouen, and the rabbi was very pleased to meet me, and he had heard about me, and he showed me an entry into in the pincus of the congregation, that on a given day I arrived and I reorganized the Jewish community.
So in other words, so you were instrumental in organizing a Jewish community in France.
In reorganizing. It's a whole Jewish community, reorganizing. Yeah.
And you were helpful in that.
That's right.
Okay. Now, when did you first deal with DPs?
My first contact with DPs, I think, was when I got to Germany.
And
I don't think I ran into any before then. I was, when was it? It was sometime in either August or September, the exact date I don't recall, of that year, the European... 1945. The V-Day was over, the war in Europe was over. I was supposed to be assigned, I was on orders to go to the CBI,
which is?
This China, Burma, India Theater of Operation. I mean, if you know it, why do I have to repeat it?
Well, it's for the tape.
And we were at a processing center already at the time when I received temporary orders to conduct services in Germany, and these temporary orders remained permanent orders. And so
they were...
Temporary from the government.
Oh, they were temporary, but who made them permanent?
I really don't know. It's a strange phenomenon. I really don't know, because somewheres along the line, the orders got. I don't know. I never went back. I never got orders back to go back to rejoin my unit that was going on to the CBI, and so. I somehow remained where I was. I was assigned at that time to, I think it was 6th Corps, which was a subdivision of 7th Army. And, or I was assigned to 7th Army for temporary duty. And given the assignment of conducting high holiday services for the Army in Schwabisch Halle. And while I was after the services there, somehow I was assigned. I was assigned after that to the 6th Corps, with headquarters in Esslingen, Germany, and I remained there with 6th Corps. Esslingen is outside of Stuttgart, and that's where I did most of the work with the DPs. And then after that, I was assigned to 7th Army when Browdy returned. Max Browdy went back to the States for a certain period of time, and I went up to Army headquarters, and then from Army headquarters I went back to the States.
Okay, well, let's get back to the DPs. Your first encounter with the DPs was...
My first encounter with DPs, I think, was in...
say August, May.
I don't recall whether I ran into any DPs while I was in France.
It might be of interest to you know that while I was in Rouen, where was a great deal of shipping going on, and boats were coming in and out of that city, and of course the Army personnel were involved with the American boats and the others at the wharf there, that I had been approached at the time to try to get a large supply of Mae West jackets and blankets in order to equip one of the boats, which later on was to carry some of the DPs from whatever port of debarkation it might have been, in order to try to get to what was at that time Palestine.
But
it so happened that I regrettably could not have fulfilled that, because shortly after the request had been made to me, my unit was assigned to the CBI, and we had to break up our unit immediately and pack up our things and get on our way to the new assembly area.
Right. Well, without mentioning the fact that it was another rabbi or another chaplain, it wasn't just Stam, a GI.
No, it was someone in a responsible position who was knowledgeable as to what was happening in the attempt to save as many Jews as possible and to take them out of Europe and into Palestine. And of course it was done with the cooperation of the Jewish Brigade at that time.
Fine. Now, before we get on further, let's get back to the DPs.
Yeah.
In Germany that you met outside of Stuttgart.
I think the first Germans, the first DPs, I could say, or people who had suffered as a result of the Nazi period that I came in contact, was in Schwabisch Halle, where I met some of the Jews, a few Jewish families that had come back from the concentration camps, or from southern France, or from the concentration camps, or Theresienstadt, wherever they may have been, and they came back into that community. I was there very briefly, only for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for the services. The services were conducted in what was formerly the Hitler Jugend building. I found in that community when I met the Jews, a few of the Jews there, and in order to set up the place for the services for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they took me to the community museum, where they still had an ark, which we borrowed, and some other Jewish artifacts which we used during the services. They also led me into the curator of the museum, led me into a place where he had saved some walls of what may have been a very beautiful sukkah, or a small synagogue at one time, which had been disassembled and kept in the museum of the community. And he had protected it when the Nazis wanted to destroy everything. Interestingly, I wanted to purchase it from him. We set it a price, and I was going to run it into France and then send it over to the United States. But I somehow had second thoughts at the moment, and I discussed it with military government, and it was indicated to me that this was contrary to a general order, and though it may not have been of great concern at the moment, but I felt that if I ever brought it to the United States and gave it to the seminary and put it in the Jewish Museum, and then somebody saw that it was a gift to the museum and it was acquired in a very illegal manner, I didn't think that was worthwhile. And so I left it there, and that's where it is, I think, until this very day. That was my first contact with the people who had experienced in Germany, that is, of the German population, the full impact of Nazism. And then from there I was assigned to 6th Corps headquarters with where we were based in Esslingen and a nearby DP center in Stuttgart. Mm-hmm. While I was there, I think my first, upon recollection, I'm not sure whether my first contact with the DPs was in out of Stuttgart or out of while I was assigned in Schwabisch Halle. That there was a DP camp, a Schloss, which was a castle, in which there were about 100 or so Jews.
Do you remember the name of that?
I think it was Schwabisch Gmünd. I'm now trying to remember whether it was in Schwabisch Halle that I had the service, in Schwabisch Gmünd that we had this DP center. Ultimately, I found this. I was told about these Jews who were in a Schloss, and I went to visit them, and I found the conditions under which they were living, and it was, from my point of view, very unbearable. And so I approached military government, and through the good offices of military government.
And this was legally?
This was done legally and officially. Nothing illegal about it. I complained that these people were living under very poor conditions after all that they had suffered, and the result was that we had taken over an Altersheim, an old folks' home, in I think it was Schwabisch Gmünd. I'll have to get the exact facts for you as to which community it was. An Altersheim, a very wonderful structure, very well constructed with all the necessary facilities, single rooms, with the kind of facilities that at the time in Germany were considered a great advance. There were, for instance, showers on every floor, a dumbwaiter in the building, a central kitchen, heating in the building, and there were some old Germans living in the building. We made provision for them to be moved out, and other housing found for them, and we moved the Jews from this Schloss into this Altersheim, and they were very well situated there, well provided for. And the truth of the matter is that when later on out of Esslingen, when I wanted to take a day off or so, I would go out there and spend a day just relaxing with them, and I was always welcome there. Mm-hmm.
But you didn't have daily contact with them or weekly contact with them?
I didn't have daily contact with them because once we set that up, there was quite a distance from where I was.
Who took care of them at that point?
They each one of them set up their own individual committees.
There weren't any Jewish organizations involved with them?
No. At that point, I don't recall whether there were any Jewish organizations involved. I don't think so. It was before JDC came upon the scene. In any large numbers.
So you were actually,
I was actually there.
They could come to you.
They came to me for everything.
I see.
For whatever help that was necessary and whatever assistance they needed. If there was a question between them and the authorities, I would deal with them.
You're the intermediary.
As it turned out, there was a situation where it became somewhat sticky there because the Altersheim was at the end of a road. Mm-hmm. And after the Jews had moved in there, the homes leading in that area had been taken over for other displaced persons, not Jews, mm-hmm. Poles. Mm-hmm. And then the question became whether controlling these people not to rummage all over the place and to contain them, they built an entrance gate to the general compound. And in that way, the people were restricted and had to go through in and out. And because these Altersheim was at the end of the road, the Jews had to go through this checkpoint as well. And this became a rather difficult thing for the Jews because it was again reminding them of some of the business of entering into the concentration camp and going out of it. And we had quite a deal of negotiations with the colonel in charge of military government and the work with the DPs. And of course, the United Nations or UNRWA? UNRWA they were under the supervision of UNRWA, and pretty much. Insofar as our work was concerned, my work with them was concerned, to see to it that they had all the necessary things that they needed to maintain themselves. The food supplies, of course, was provided by UNRWA and military government.
Mm-hmm. You worked well with UNRWA then?
Yeah, there was very fine cooperation with them and the military government at all times. I don't recall any one instance where there was any tension between myself in my unofficial role as advisor to the DPs. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, the Army accepted the role of the Jewish chaplain as liaison, pretty much, with the DPs.
You're talking about the Army on the highest level as well as
yes,
on the lower
yes.
level?
To give you an illustration, when I when I got my orders to report to 6th Corps, now I recall that instance, and I was presented to the general in charge of 6th Corps, and he greeted me very warmly and said, "We're very happy to have you." I was the first Jewish chaplain assigned to the Corps. He says, because there's so much work that has to be done with the Jews who are in Stuttgart, where we had a large installation.
Did you have to neglect your own military duties towards the Jewish?
No. There was no real neglect of one or the other. I didn't find that there was any neglect on that level. In my instance, especially not. But there was no problem. In fact, I recall one Army officer who was at 6th Corps at the time. I think it was a Colonel Bilbo. Oh, I remember his name very well, because his father was Senator Bilbo from the South, who was a well-known anti-Semite. And this fellow came, when I reported, came to me and greeted me very warmly and told me that I could always count on whatever help he could be of assistance to me. And I, at the time, was just a first lieutenant, and he was a full colonel. And with the Army rank, that meant a great deal, but I had never forgotten the warmth with which, especially he, greeted me. So that, let me get back, where were we? Oh yes, what happened with this installation in Schwabisch Gmünd was that I would, from time to time, go out there, and every time I would go out there, I never came empty-handed. It was either a case of bringing a certain amount of money, Allied marks that I had, to give them, to buy whatever they wanted, to assist them, to bring whatever stuff came to me through the mails.
Well, that's an interesting point. What came to you through the mails?
Well, the United States Army said that a chaplain is allowed to receive 75 pounds of ecclesiastical equipment, ecclesiastical needs. Well, this became the loophole for everything under the sun. And as a result, packages were sent to the chaplains from all over the country. And what we usually would get would be clothes, food, that would be preserved food, or packaged food that was able to stand it. And before long, everybody had a supply store of their own.
Well, how did they know who? In other words, who sent?
Somebody would put an item in the newspaper. For instance, my wife was living in Pittsburgh at the time. Yeah. So the Pittsburgh News Anglo-Jewish periodical had an item, send it to Chaplain so-and-so.
In other words, it was initiated by you.
No. It wasn't necessarily initiated by us. It was initiated by someone locally, the local people, the Jews in the United States, anxious to do something.
Well, how did they know that you would be in the position to do so?
Oh, they knew that I was in Germany.
Uh-huh.
Somebody would let them know that I was in Germany, whether somebody found out, knew my wife and told them, or whatever it was, or a rabbi in any community. Now, the man who did the finest job on it, was almost paid with a court-martial for it, you will get when you go up to Burlington.
Right.
The greatest achievement that was done by Maxwell. Maxwell did he was the first line of communication and the largest and the greatest. Everything. He used to get them by the carloads. I would only get them by the little truck every now and then.
Did the Army bother you about getting so much material?
In my instance, no. In the case of Maxwell, and let him tell you the story.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's no point in my telling you his experiences. But I had no problem. The stuff started coming in, and I didn't know where it was coming from, except that somebody said to me, "Hey, Chaplain, you got a lot of stuff down at the post office." And the next thing I knew was there were sacks full of stuff, and I said, "Okay, give me a day or two in order to get the stuff out of there and find a place to store it." I ultimately took a room in what was the Gemeindehaus in Stuttgart, to which all the stuff was brought. And
the Army cooperated with you in that?
Well, the Army, not officially. In other words, the kids in the post office, the GIs in the post office, would hold the stuff for me as long as I needed it, and of course I took care of them. I always shared my liquor rations with them, and so they were very happy, and I was very happy, and so everybody was happy. And then I brought the stuff into the Gemeindehaus in Stuttgart, and there I had one room set aside where we had a storage room, and before long there was the stuff started multiplying, namely clothes and foodstuffs and all kinds of things. Whenever I had any specific needs for things, I would write home, either to my wife, my father, who was alive at the time, and I would get whatever I wanted or whatever I felt I needed. For instance, in one instance, I ran into a group of Jews who were in a TB hospital run by the Vatican. And
do you know where this was?
I'll have to try to find the exact location. I think I can go through my notes to find it. And I wrote home asking for. The doctors told me that what they needed was some kind of fats, Crisco. And I wrote home, and at the time, Crisco was rationed in the United States. It's hard to come by. But I got a large supply of it and took it over there. And also, they needed winter underwear. And that too came. And it was all sent over there. And though it was for a couple of days in Stuttgart, somebody wanted it, and I said, absolutely no, this must go to the hospital there, which it did go. And of course, as an aside, the people at home wrote, now don't go where there's TB. But of course, that was of no consequence. That was, and the same was true with whenever there was need for trying to locate people in the United States with very scanty information. I would get the scanty information, send it home, and would, fortunately, almost in all instances, made contact with families in the United States.
And you were instrumental in reuniting families?
Oh yes, and this was done no organized manner at the time, because the JDC hadn't as yet come in on this level, and we did it pretty much by I wrote to home and said that in Philadelphia, in New York, I met somebody who had an uncle who was the scanty information that they had, and fortunately they were able to come bring it together. I remember one night I got a telegram from somebody in New Jersey telling me that they're glad that their relatives are alive, and to do it, they'll do whatever they can. I remember this in particular because I got it on Friday night, and then on the following morning I drove out to this DP center, which incidentally was not a Jewish DP center. Mm-hmm. It was a Christian DP center. I shouldn't say Christian, a Polish one. Mm-hmm. And there were a handful of Jews there. And I finally found the few Jews who were there, and one of them gave me this information, and I reunited the family in that fashion. So that this was...
so this was a third DP area?
Well, I didn't consider that as a DP area, mm-hmm. because there were just a handful of Jews.
They didn't make any request of you?
Yeah, ultimately we took them out of there and took them into Stuttgart.
Mm-hmm. On your initiative?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We took them out of there because they didn't want to remain there. And you see, what occurred was that this was shortly after VE Day. A couple of months, but to them it was, they had no contact with Jews. They were still afraid that ultimately they would have to go back to Poland. Mm-hmm. And in their fear of going back to Poland, they were afraid that once they got there, if they admitted that they were Jews, they would be killed. And so they couldn't conceive after all of this time that there were Jews who were going to help them, and that there were non-Jews who were going to help them by virtue of the fact that they are Jews.
So when you first came to this Polish DP camp, what was the reaction, and what
well, the people in charge of the Polish DP camp were American UNRWA personnel, and I came in and I told them who I was, and I said, I understand via the grapevine that there are some Jews here, and I'd like to try to find them by. We all think that by virtue of the fact that we're Jews, we can always spot another Jew. But don't try to do it, because it just doesn't work, especially if you walk into a Polish DP camp. They all have the same characteristics. And I finally found one, and then that one led me to another one, and I found the number who were there, and then ultimately we took them out. But this was a problem, a very serious one. There was, outside of Heidelberg, an orphanage of complete orphans. In other words, those who had no one mm-hmm. as a result of it. And of course there were Jews and Christians there. Mm-hmm. This installation came to my attention because there were some Jews there. And I was already stationed at Heidelberg at the time.
Remember, can we try to be specific about
dates?
About dates, yeah.
I'll have to try to find that for you.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
This information I don't have.
Okay,
fine. In fact, I'm surprised that I'm even recalling all these things now. One thing is reminding me of another. I was told that there was. This was called to my attention by virtue of the fact that there was a specific girl in this camp, in this installation, mm-hmm. I may not use the word camp, installation, who was making life miserable for all the Jews, mm-hmm. in that she was going about trying to convert them to Catholicism, and wouldn't leave them alone. So I came to the installation and spoke to the person in charge, and explained the problem, and I said, I'd like you to talk to this young lady and explain to her that this can't go on. If she feels so strongly about her religion, and I respect it, then let her go into a place where everyone is of a similar religion, and not to try to do any missionary work. And I was assured that they would do something about it. I left, and the situation was not corrected. I came back again, and complained again, and this time I said I'd like to meet this young lady. And I met her, and I spoke with her, and I indicated to her that I was a Jewish chaplain, and that the United States government recognizes Jews and accepts Jews, and the fact that Lehman is the head, was a Jew, is the head of the UNRWA and everything else. And I said, now, we must ask you to stop this. You just can't do this. You're entitled to your religion, but we don't countenance this kind of. And I said, please don't let it happen anymore. And again, I went back, the thing persisted. And I came the third time, and I called her in this time, and I wasn't so easy on her. And I indicated to her that if she persisted in this any longer, I would have to insist that she go to a Polish DP center, because she was making life very difficult for the Jews who were there, and the United States Army would not allow for it. Mm-hmm. At that point, she broke down and cried bitterly. She was a Jew. She was Jewish. She lived through the whole Holocaust by being a Catholic, and she was afraid that as soon as anyone discovered that she was a Jew, she would be killed. And in order to prove that she was a Catholic, she felt that the only way to do it is to convince others to become Catholics. And an interesting thing occurred was that at that moment, her entire facial expression changed. From the tenseness and hardness, there was a softness on it.